world of technology out there. It was good to be here. I want to have a personal privilege to thank all of you for your support for me and my family, and as we have gone through 3 months of 3 deaths. And so it's been a kind of a whirlwind kind of thing, but we are appreciative of all the love and support that we have received from each of you during that. I told Phil the other day, I guess, I had assumed people had quit sending cards, sympathy cards, birthday cards, whatever. We're doing everything electronic now, and I have just been amazed at the number of cards we have received, some from some of you, and so I appreciate that. Thank you for that. Today, we're going to talk about the text that we're going to be using for Sunday. And that's what we're going to be doing for the next several weeks. I thought it might be good to tie in what we're doing in our All In campaign journey together, and have a chance to do that, but put some connection in a different way to what we're doing with worship and what we're doing here in study. The Gospel of Matthew, which is where we are for this study today, we're in the 22nd chapter, 15th through the 22nd verses. That's Matthew 22, 15 through 22. And I'll share the text with you in a few moments. One of the things that it will be helpful for us to know is that the Gospel of Matthew is 28 chapters long. And it's in the 21st chapter that we have the triumphal entry of Jesus into Jerusalem. And so from that point on until the end of the 28th chapter, which is when we have the Great Commission that Jesus gives his disciples, we're having basically Holy Week. So for all of these chapters in Matthew, we're in Holy Week, and that's where we are right now. Jesus has already had the triumphal entry. He is beginning to preach and to teach all around Jerusalem. He's been on the teaching steps at the temple. And so for that reason, we've got a lot of action going on. He's proclaiming a lot of things. He's telling lots of parables. And so we are now at this point in time where he's just throwing lots of stuff out there. Well, you got to remember that during this time of Holy Week, it's also Passover in Jerusalem. And this is kind of like Mardi Gras in New Orleans, in that people from all the world have come to Jerusalem. And they've come and they're participating in all these celebrations. There's over 30,000 sacrifices that are taking place at the temple. 30,000 sacrifices that are taking place. And so people are coming in, they're making their contributions. And so you remember, one of the things that happens during Holy Week is that Jesus goes into the temple and turns the table over because the shopkeepers, the vendors there that are temple vendors, have desecrated that place by cheating the individuals out of what they would be due. So anyway, all this is going on during that time. And so from this triumphal entry until we conclude the Gospel of Matthew, we have things happening that are there. So in chapter 22, there are several parables that you're familiar with that are in 22. The first one is the parable of the wedding banquet, the wedding feast. Remember, there's a king who has a wedding that he is giving for a child. And when that happens, people come, but yet some people are not prepared to come. And so he is upset about that. And he offers invitation. Not everybody is coming. The ones that do come aren't prepared. And so he kind of throws people out and brings people in and kind of just opens the door with that. We also have the part we're going to talk about today, and that's paying taxes to Caesar. And this whole issue of church and state and what is going on with that. Then we have the marriage at the resurrection. And when he's talking about if how's that's going to work in the lives of people, the great commandment. And then the final thing is whose son is the Christ with that. And so all of that's taking place in the 22nd chapter. Now, today, on Sunday, this past week, we celebrated All Saints Day, which included our All In as a part of that. This week, we're doing All In as a part of our stewardship journey. And then the next week, we're going to be talking in the 25th chapter of Matthew about being all invested in the life of the church. And then on the 22nd, we're going to be looking at Matthew 25 also, for all are invited to be a part. And so we're going to be doing that over the next several weeks here in Matthew. Now, the passage that we're going to read today starts with the 15th verse, as I said to you, 22nd chapter, 15th verse. Then the Pharisees went out and laid plans to trap him in his words. They sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians. Teacher, they said, we know that you are a man of integrity and that you teach the ways of God in accordance with the truth, sarcastically, of course. You aren't swayed by others because you pay no attention to who they are. Tell us then, what is your opinion? Is it right to pay the imperial tax to Caesar or not? But Jesus, knowing their evil intent, said, you hypocrites, why are you trying to trap me? Show me the coin used for paying the tax. They brought him a denarius, and he asked them, whose image is this, and whose inscription? Caesar's, they replied. Then he said to them, so give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. When they heard this, they were amazed. So they left him and went away. The Pharisees and the Herodians came to trap Jesus. But who are these folks? Who are the Pharisees and who are the Herodians? The Pharisees, if you remember, is a religious party. There's a religious group. They're pious Jews who follow as best they can the intent fully of the law of the church. And the Herodians were a political party. They were individuals who followed Herod. They were buddies with Herod, and they did everything they could to support Herod in all ventures there in Jerusalem. And so you've got the Pharisees from the religious side, you've got the Herodians from the local politics that are there. And so these two parties customarily fought each other. You know, it's been interesting throughout history and time. Church and state have always found a rub, except in different points in times of history. And even that has brought things like the Reformation that took place, the Great Reformation of the church, when Martin Luther put the thesis up against the church, but also it became a political issue because, if you remember, in Europe, the church and the state were the same thing. That's how the Anglican Church came to be. The Church of England came to be because King Henry wanted to do what? Get divorced. And the Pope in Rome said no. And he said, fine, I'll just start my own church. And it was the Church of England. And so throughout history and time, we have had that happen. We also know that many people left England to come to the colonies, to get away from the government telling the church what it was supposed to do. And it's been interesting, too, that most of the time through history and time, that the church has been the one that's pushed back. We don't want you in our business, government. Just stay away from us. We often think it's a state thing, but in a lot of places it becomes the church that says, no, we want to govern ourselves, therefore stay away from us. So these two parties who commonly fought against each other because one was supporting the Jewish people, the other was supporting the government. And so you had a mixture of people coming there. They get together, you know, what they say, politics and religion make strange bedfellows. Well, that's what happens here. What they have is that Jesus has come in this week. He has had a parade without a permit during a time that it was just full. I mean, again, it's like being in Mardi Gras and having New Orleans, that compact area in the French Quarter, and all these people coming in, and then you have one parade right after another. Many of us don't realize sometimes in New Orleans, there's actually, 18 to 25 parades that take place actually as a part of Mardi Gras. And so you have that happening, but Jesus comes in And Jesus has a parade without telling anybody he's coming. And what does that do? It creates an angst on the part of the soldiers. Could you imagine trying to be crowd control at Mardi Gras, or try to be crowd control in Passover time when so many people are coming from all over the world looking for places to eat, places to stay, to come to the temple to make their worship there? So this is what's going on in the midst of Jesus coming into town and then starting being a rebel rouser. And he's not the only one that's probably preaching and teaching against the government or preaching and teaching against religion, but he begins to have this huge following. And so we have that, and so they have a common hatred of Jesus and what he's doing. So by the end of the week, Jesus is going to alienate the religious leaders, the political leaders, and the people themselves socially. And so it's a social alienation, it is a political alienation, it is religious alienation that Jesus finds himself in. So no wonder before it's all over, the outcome comes as it is, because everybody is trying to get rid of this rebel rouser who is in Jerusalem at this time. So we have the Pharisees and the Herodians trying to trap Jesus. And the answers of Jesus in the parables was centered and focused on himself. During this week, you have in the temple and you have at different places, Jesus is teaching and preaching, people showing up. And just as they did in the Galilee, you know, when Jesus was even in the Galilee, there would be people from Jerusalem who heard about him that went up there to try to test him. The Pharisees and the Sadducees went up there, and they were beginning to challenge him there. And they've heard about him. So his reputation for some has preceded him. Maybe for some others, this is their first encounter with him. But the answers that he gives are really focused on himself and his kingdom, God's kingdom and what it's going to be. So the Herodians and the Pharisees do not hear a word of what Jesus is really saying. They just know he has gotten the people all riled up. And so they're preoccupied by their own concepts and the things that they are. Now, they have asked him, tell us, therefore, what do you think? Is it lawful to give tribute to Caesar or not? This was the strategy. If they said yes, or if the Lord says yes, then the Pharisees would catch him. You know, if he says no, then the Herodians catch him. So they think they've got him in this bind. They think they've got him where no matter what he says, somebody is going to be able to bring charges against him. Somebody is going to be able to put a stop to this, is what they think. And so that's their strategy. Either way, they thought we're going to be able to catch him at this point. But he's kind of slippery as an eel, as they say. He figures out the way to do that. Now, the other thing that's interesting about that is there's actually 3 different kinds of taxes that people would pay in Jerusalem at this point. First of all, there's what they called a ground tax. And that was a percentage of the crops that you actually farmed. And whatever the crops were, whatever the goods were, with that, you would give a portion of that to the government. That was part of their social outreach to people that didn't have things. That, you know, it was a way to do that, but it was also a way to make sure that the government had its hand in, they felt like, what it was they were doing. The second was an income tax, which was a percentage of your income. Most of the time it was 1% of your income. So taxes are not new. They've been around for a long, long time, no matter what. Again, the government has wanted to feel like to have roads, to have infrastructure, to do all the things it is. This is how we're going to do that. And then the third one is a poll tax. And that was 1 denarius by men between the ages of 14 and 65, and women between the ages of 12 and 65. Not sure why the girls had an extra 2 years of being taxed, but that was the case. So 1 denarius with those. And again, a denarius was usually a full day's pay with that. So that was a part of the tax too. But Jesus, of course, is wiser than the evil ones that have come to try to trap him. And he defeats their plan. He comes up with a way to undermine what it is that they're trying to accomplish. It's almost like that light bulb going on and saying, oh, we hadn't thought about that. And so that's what Jesus is able to do. So the Pharisees and the Herodians thought that they were wiser than the Lord, but they found out that that was not the case. He was their creator, and this was going to be, they're just creatures of the creation at this point. So the Lord says to them, show me the tribute money. Show me the dollars or the coins that you have. And so they give him a coin, and he did so. They're, by then they've kind of lost their case, because he gives them back this thing. The Lord is wise, and he says to them, he doesn't have any money, which is the interesting thing about it. Jesus doesn't pay taxes other than what the might come out of the coffers a little bit. But the bottom line is he doesn't have a paying job. And so he really doesn't have something to give to them at this point. So anyway, it means that they were the ones that they felt like they got caught with that. So he says, pay with that. We must see that this is not a matter of religion and politics for Jesus. It's altogether a matter of the kingdom of God and how we do that. Now, one of the things that I did a little research, and some of you that are history majors might have a little better idea than I did, is I began to think about our own coins. What does it say on our own coins and our own currency? In God we trust. Remember where that came from? How that got started? When it was? I'll tell you. Sentiment came from the people. It was coming out of the Civil War in the 1860s that this actually became. There were people that were trying to say, in the midst of the strife that's in our world right now during the Civil War, what can we do to show support? What is it? What can we show that God is in the midst of trying to heal this experience? And so they do that. So on November the 13th in 1861, the Secretary of the Treasury, Salmon Chase, received a letter from the Reverend M.R. Watkinson, who was a minister of the gospel of Ridleyville, Pennsylvania, of all places, Phil. And so he wrote and said to him, we've got to do something to help heal the country. We've got to do something to help show that God is in our midst, even during this difficult time. And so why don't we find a way to have a statement on our coinage, on our bills, on our coins, that allow us to remember that it is God who has given us all that we have. And so they began, again, of course, and this was in 1861. Congress finally passed in April 22nd, 1864, 3 years later, the legislation that would put the composition of a 1 cent coin and a 2 cent coin. And at that point in time, the director of the mint was instructed to come up with a design to be able to put a statement of faith on the 2 cent coin. So initially, that's where it started. And after many back and forth over what the wording would be, the secretary then presented and was passed, in God we trust. And so it's been a part of our coinage ever since, reminding us that even though, all things in the midst of what we do comes from God. So the people are amazed, and the Pharisees and the Herodians go away. They're dismayed once again. And you remember there's several stories that take place in the scriptures where people try to trap Jesus and he gets away. And so they go away disappointed because they're not able at this point. But remember, during this Holy Week, day after day after day of Holy Week, things begin to mount. And it finally gets to the point that too many people are disgruntled. Too many people of authority are tired of this. It's time to take it to the ultimate. So when clergy, interestingly, visit families, one of the things that kind of shifting gears a little bit, that's the text of that, but I wanted to, because this week is our celebration Sunday, wanted to talk a little bit about the connection of our theme for All In, and also for the remembrance that we have. When clergy visit families to plan a funeral or memorial service, a lot of times we ask the family to describe the individual that's to be immortalized to us. And so we ask them to give us descriptive words. What are some stories? What are some things that we can do to remember this person? And it got me thinking, as I've walked through this somewhat myself. The pastor at Shiloh United Methodist Church had come to visit with my family to talk about my mom. And it was that time of reminiscence, that time of remembering her life and her legacy and the things that we would take away from her life for us to keep forever. And so we do that, and we have a chance to do that. And it often got me to think too about, what would I want somebody to say about me? Someday somebody will say something about me. You say things about me now anyway, but at least as far as a memorial, what is it that people are going to say about me? What is it that you would want people to say about you? What descriptive words would people have about you? One of the things that I often think of when I think of that is the individuals who write their own obituaries. Have any of you written your own? Yeah, some of you already have, and it gives a good starting place for your family to change all the things that you were going to say about yourself with that. But it gives them a chance to see the things that you thought were important in your life. And so what would you want your loved ones to remember about you? One of the things that I want to be remembered as is a generous person. I want to be remembered as someone who was concerned about others and their needs, and that I was generous in my time. I was generous in my presence. I was generous in my contributions to them and their need. It reminds me too, it's more blessed to give than to receive. It's one of the things my mom instilled in us. You heard Phil mention the other day, one of the things my mom always said was, no matter how much we have, it's always to be shared. And so whenever we encountered folks that were in need, they were one of the first ones, no matter what we had and what we didn't have, to respond to that. When God created humankind, God created us to be willing to give to God and to give to others. We know the prayer that John Wesley comes out of the Wesleyan tradition. I am no longer my own, but thine. Put me to what thou wilt, rank me with whom thou wilt. Put me to doing, put me to suffering. Let me be employed for thee or laid aside for thee. Exalted for thee or brought low for thee. Let me be full, let me be empty. Let me have all things, let me have nothing. I freely and heartily yield all things to the pleasure and disposal. And as the Holy Spirit works in our lives, we begin to see the needs of others. If we don't do something, who will? I often hear that in the church, it's kind of up to us. Sometimes that's an expectation of the church. If anybody's going to respond, the church ought to do that. But I think too, for us, if we have that instilled into us, if somebody's going to respond, it ought to be the church. It is more blessed to give and receive, as in Acts 20. But what happens when we're generous? What happens to us and what happens to others? When we're generous, we become changed. We become new creatures. We are filled with joy, and our lives are blessed by what we do. Most people say, I do what I do to help others because I get as much out of it as they do. I get more than they do. Whatever that task is, whatever I have done, the joy that I feel from that is important. And when we give generously, I have found that people tend to be more generous. When we get used to giving, then sometimes we continue to give above and beyond what we anticipated, because that becomes a part of our nature. That becomes a part of who we are. So we're very fortunate that as we come to this time of celebration, this Sunday, as we come to this time of remembering of all that God has given to us, and remembering in the midst that we do trust in God, we have a chance to do that. And hopefully we will all respond this week to that. So thank you, Michael and Jeannie, for your leadership in the journey that we have. But also we want to remember that God calls us to that. So there are questions for those of you that are online. I think Mark will put you into groups as he usually does. For those of you here in the room, we have, because the power being out, there's some technological glitch. So I have made some copies of discussion questions that the ones online will be taking a look at too. So if we will, let's see, it looks like there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 of us. We can do